Hi, everyone. My name is Mirabal Lee, and I am the Cybersecurity Awareness Coordinator here at UC Santa Barbara. So, as you may know, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month throughout the month of October, and the importance of cybersecurity in our daily lives are perhaps greater than ever. Technology alone cannot always protect our computers and information. Being aware of information security issues and following best practices are excellent ways to protect yourself, your family, and the UC community. And attending sessions just like these are a great way to increase your awareness and help yourself and your community to be cyber safe. So all of our programming this month is entirely virtual and system-wide across the UC system. And so we have many events from different campuses across the UC system that you are totally free to attend. I'm going to drop this link right here in the chat where you can find all of those. So first off, today we're going to be starting off with Dr. Chad Spensky, founder and CEO of Allthenticate and a former gaucho. So we'll be hearing him in just a bit. But first off, I would like to briefly introduce him, and I'll do that as he gets his screen sharing all set up. And then we'll hear from him and save the last 15 or so minutes for Q&A. And during Q&A, you guys can use the Q&A function in order to get your questions in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before we wrap up at 1 o'clock. So a little bit about Dr. Chad Spensky. So Chad is a computer security researcher, entrepreneur, an educator who is passionate about using technology to make people's lives easier and their digital systems more secure. Chad has more than 10 years of research experience and is a lifetime hacker, and formerly he was a member of the technical research staff at MIT Lincoln Laboratory and has since continued to help them solve some of the Department of Defense's toughest cybersecurity problems. He received his PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2020. He also possesses an MS in computer security from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as well as a BS in mathematics, a BS in computer science, and a minor in economics from the University of Pittsburgh. So thank you so much for joining us, Chad, and the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this talk is going to be very different from every other hacking talk I'm sure you've ever seen. So throughout my career, there's kind of been this tendency that every talk about hacking is like bad and doom and gloomy and like the world's on fire. But being on the inside of it, there's actually like a lot of pretty hilarious stuff that goes on. Like there's a lot of hackers that have really good sense of humor, a lot of hackers that like really fumble their hacks in like really funny ways. So the goal of this talk is to kind of change that. So first, why am I qualified to give this talk? So in my life, I've hacked some things. I'm going to try and give as much as I can from a first person point of view. Like these are real stories that I've either personally been involved in or know the people personally. So like, a lot of hacking stories become like phishing stories, right? Like, oh my God, the fish was 3,000 pounds. But these are things that like, truly I was a part of, and they are real, at least to the best of my recollection. I'm going to do my best to not embellish them. So I have a lot of friends who are really good hackers, and I always love reading about, hacks. When they come in the news, I always read all the nitty-gritty details, as much technical detail as I can, and really try to understand, is this a cool hack or is this, kind of inflated by the media? So why am I giving this talk? Actually, when I was making this talk, I learned of this word called edutainment. So I'm hoping this one's gonna be a little more entertaining and less, you'll learn through the entertainment, through just stories of my life and people that I've got to meet and things that I've got to be experienced with, and some advocacy. So I think, the media, everyone kind of paints hackers as like this bad thing. Like you think of these organized criminals that are trying to steal money and ransomware companies and all this stuff. But what I'm trying to advocate is that hackers are actually necessary for society to advance. I mean, this is the only reason I ever got interested in computer science. There are a bunch of people like me, and there's a bunch of technology that would have never existed or wouldn't have been as secure or as stable if it had not been for hackers, with a good sense of humor kind of poking around. So the advocacy I'm going to, sort of push for this talk is that criminals are bad, but hackers are necessary. I used to work at MIT. So this is a picture. MIT has a very big like hacking kind of prank culture. They actually put a cop car up on top of one of the MIT buildings. And when people came out in the morning, they had the sirens going. And this is just one of many kind of things in the culture. So they're one of the schools that kind of embodies this. And I truly believe as well that, hackers are sort of necessary as long as you do it in a fun way. So first, I'm going to go over some old school hacks, sort of how I got into it back in the heyday, as they say, before all the criminals got involved. And then we'll go through, some online hacks that I think are interesting, potentially funny, and then some IRL hacks. So IRL means in real life. So these, sort of hacker lingo for stuff like touch the real world. So ideally, we'd be in person, pouring out a glass of Cavassier and sitting by the fire for a little fireside chat with a hacker. And again, hopefully I don't go to jail for any of this. I've tried to keep it pretty low key. So back in middle school, my AIM name, which at the time was, everyone was on Instant Messenger, was Heel Sictor 13, which was my, sort of childish way of trying to encode Elite Hacker 13. So very early in my career, I thought of myself as an elite hacker. Looking back now, I was a total noob, but I really liked messing with my friends and kind of learning more about computers. So there was this Trojan horse program called Sub 7 Trojan. I'm sure some people in the audience have heard of this. And the whole premise of a Trojan is that I'm going to send you a program, and just like the historical story of the Trojan horse, you're going to open it and it's going to let me completely control your computer, from my computer. So you install this thing and then I get full remote control. So it literally says fun in the description, right? So this is an actual screenshot of this toy to use. And there were some things that were extra fun and these would work. You'd like open your friend's CD-ROM or hide the clock or make it speak. You could do text to speech. You could hide the desktop. You could do all sorts of extra fun things, as it says here. And it was really fun. So a particular story about this, I used to Trojan all my friends because I don't know if I was a jerk or had a good sense of humor, but my buddy tells me that, hey, we're getting ready to play Counter-Strike, the game won't load. I need a video card. It says I need a new video card. I'm like, dude, I got you. For the record, a video card is a piece of hardware. But I send him videocard14.exe. Like, dude, here's a brand new video card. Install this. Boom, he installs it. Much to my surprise, he assures me that it worked. Ta-da! He's like, sick, let's play Counter-Strike. So one of the great features you could do here was flip the user screen upside down. So there is something, particularly enjoyable of playing your friend in a game, a competitive game, and you're all on Trello or whatever, not Trello, TeamSpeak or whatever it was at the time, and have him screaming like, guys, I don't understand. My screen just flipped upside down. But, me knowing that was me is kind of great. That like, he's clearly going to lose this game, and it's because of this new video card he got. So this is kind of the stuff I was into back in high school, and I think kind of hackers in general, like, mess with your friends. This wasn't to make money. It wasn't to steal anything from him. It was literally just to goof with my friends. But there's always a dark side to this. So because of this, I was always interacting with hackers and trying to get better tools and all this cool stuff. So I'm sure you've seen this scene from The Matrix where, it just starts typing on a screen, like the Matrix has you, all this creepy stuff. So me and my buddy, another true story, we're at his house. We're trying to download some hacker tools or some game or something. We install this tool and literally this scene happens to us. Someone does this to us. The screen goes black. His dad's name was Alan, and it pops up exactly like that. Hello, Alan, ... Like the Matrix has you kind of stuff. I don't remember the exact text. And we freaking panicked. Like we assumed that like everything was stolen and, we just ruined his dad's computer, all this stuff. To this day, I don't think we've ever told him that we did that. We eventually figured out how to get rid of it and all those things. But like, this stuff's kind of ridiculous that like, this is what old day hacking was. Like the stuff you see in the Matrix is some people actually did this stuff to each other just for fun on the weekends. So, So it's all fun and games, right? This is now in high school. We're having a good time. We're hacking each other for fun. We're hacking the school computers all the time, mainly to install Counter-Strike on them, but also just setting up stupid messages to each other and, again, having a good time hacking. And we figure out that all of our systems on our school have this like Novell desktop client thing. And they send broadcast messages to it for updates. So we figured out how to message each other. So like, no matter what's on your screens here, whatever, you're in the middle of an exam thing, we could like send you a message. We kind of acknowledge that like, hey, there's a way that you could send this to every computer in the school, but we never do it because that's crazy. Our one buddy decides our senior year that he's going to try it. He's going to like try this broadcast thing that we figured out. So he sends a message. This is like 3 days before our high school graduation, or maybe it was our junior year, but either way, it's like right at the end of school, that just says, cock, from him with his name and his email. Immediately we hear a loudspeaker like, Will blank, I won't say his name, please report to the principal's office immediately. And he was suspended immediately for 3 days of that year and 2 years coming into the next school year or something like that. So the fun kind of, it has a limit. At some point, it's not fun anymore. And some people pay consequences for it. But again, I just want to give you context that like, these are real stories. This is not stuff out of a movie. So this is kind of like, one of those lessons learned in life that, with great power comes great responsibility, that, me and my friends figured out how to kind of take over the school's networks and do all this fun stuff and screw with each other. But, at the same time, we needed to not be totally irresponsible with it. And there's kind of a bigger lesson here that I've learned over my career as well. Like there were some exploits that we could have crafted that could, there's still vulnerabilities. We could break into any building on Earth effectively, but we made the conscious decision not to create that. Maybe somebody else has, but, the thought was kind of why, if that code existed, it's fun, it's, quirky, we could go walk around in any building and break the law, but, it seemed maybe like not the greatest thing to give the world. So this one, I want to give you a little context. This is a very famous comic online. I quote XKCD a lot. I'm sure a lot of people in my career do, but just the idea of an SQL injection. So SQL is a querying language for databases. So in this comic, she's calling home, we're having some computer trouble. I'm like, oh dear, my son broke something. Like, did you really name your son Robert? And then what this will do is terminate the command. So say you're going to select grades where name equals Robert. It would say select grades where name equals Robert dash, paren, and then it would drop all students from the table. So effectively what this would do is drop every student from the grades table, for example. So there's always this joke running about Bobby tables. So a lot of hackers have run with this and have actually tried to do some pretty funny things. One of my favorites, I don't know if this ever worked, but there's a speed camera, right? That's going to do image recognition on your license plate. And then presumably it's going to do some query or insert into some table that is then going to, log that you were speeding. So somebody, again, I don't know if it worked. There's a link here. You can look up the article. I just remember seeing this and finding it hilarious, that ideally what would happen, they would drive past the speed camera, it would read their license plate, and by reading their license plate and putting it in the database, it would drop every single person's speeding ticket from the database. So kudos to them. I really hope this worked because it's kind of hilarious. Even if it didn't, I commend the effort. The unfortunate with the SQL injection attacks, so they're really easy to do and really prevalent. Like almost all websites on Earth today, like there's some of like, you just one slip up and you're SQL injected. So a couple other sort of sanitization of inputs and interesting stories. This one's a little, you'll see the lesson here. So there was a hacker called Wormer, who was clearly a member of Cabin Crew, who was part of Anonymous and LulzSec, this group that was kind of really popular between like 2008 and maybe like 2012. And they would go hack people for the fun. Like the whole point of it was like, it was supposed to be funny, all this stuff. They called themselves hacktivists. And then, they got pretty politically charged. So Wormer hacked a website and posted this image. Pwned by Wormer and Cabin Crew, love you bitches. The funny thing about this is that every picture you take on an iPhone or an Android phone stores a ton of metadata in it. So it stores the kind of phone that was taken on, the kind of camera, a bunch of other really interesting, video facts or like imaging facts, but also stores the GPS coordinates. The girl in this picture turns out to be his girlfriend. So he got this picture, this elite hacker pwning all these stuff, gets this picture, posts on a website. and it has the GPS coordinates of his girlfriend's house encoded in it. They go to her house, and then within like a couple hours, they're at his house. The FBI arrested him. He's in jail. So the summary, the lesson of both of those things and how they're connected is that you must always sanitize your inputs. So the SQL injection attack, the reason that works is because you're just accepting stuff from the user. And if you don't sanitize it, if you're letting them inject commands, bad things happen. Same if you're a hacker trying to not go to jail, maybe don't post the GPS coordinates of your girlfriend on the website that you just hacked. So again, back in like the good old days of fun hacking before this was a criminal enterprise, people with really good senses of humor. Some of the things that I think are, there's a ton of account takeovers. I kind of looked around on Google and kind of figured out like which ones did I find the most humorous. So somebody hacked Burger King's account and converted it to McDonald's. And you can see their new message, Burger King USA official Twitter account just got sold to McDonald's because the Whopper flopped. Freedom is failure, McDonald's.com. In a hood near you, BK.com, So these kind of things, sure, it probably hurts the business, no doubt about that. But the whole idea of like, kind of doing this as a practical joke versus ransomwaring them or doing all this Bitcoin stuff. There's also one where somebody hacked the prime minister page of Spain, I believe it was, and changed his picture to Mr. Bean's picture. Cute, interesting hacks. I was actually, one hop away from one of these stories. So this again was another first-person account. Back in my hacker days, the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, was hating pirates, and they considered anybody who used Napster at the time, which was this free program to download MP3s, a criminal. And they were finding people with like 16-year-old kids were getting fined like $100 million fines, all this stuff from the RIA. So there's no surprise that there was a little bit of contention there between like the little hacker kids are just trying to have a good time and are broke and just want to listen to Limp Bizkit or Blink-182, and then this huge multi-billion-dollar industry that's trying to crash on us. So we're in a chat room the one day, and this guy, I didn't actually know him, but he was part of one of the crews or whatever. He's like, hey guys, I'm hacking the RIA right now. So the website is ria.gov. And we're like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then he's like, go ahead, refresh the page. Refresh the page, nothing's weird. He's like, no, refresh it again. Refresh it again. A song starts playing. So he put like an illegal MP3 on their website, has it playing live when you go to their website, and then eventually just flips the trigger on, and he's like, refresh it again, and then defaced the whole page. So all of their official news and everything was pretty much just saying, piracy is not a crime, we're not bad people, blah, 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 blah. It was kind of insane to like, be a 16-year-old kid, have these people be your colleagues effectively, and just taking down government websites for fun because, these people find my buddy, so now I'm going to go knock their website off. So a little context on these guys and sort of the history of it. So like I said, they became hacktivists. And as an outsider, someone who was reasonably skilled in computer science, it was very unclear if they were opportunistic, meaning they're just kind of scanning the internet and getting lucky, like, oh, I found a SQL injection attack on this website, and then I did this and made it look like I'm a good hacker. And I think the general consensus was that they're probably not very good hackers. They're just getting, they're getting lucky and getting a lot of press. The media really loved Anonymous. I mean, they had the Guy Fawkes mask, they had a lot going for them. And honestly, I was kind of a fan. Just the whole idea of this entity existing and everyone's anonymous, I thought was kind of interesting. And they weren't doing, really terrible things to the world. So there's this company, HB Gary, that's a government contractor, supposed to be one of the world's best companies in cybersecurity, calls these guys out. It's like, hey, we know who all of you are. We doxed you, is what they call it when you find out their real name, real address. And like, we're turning it into the feds, right? You're all done. And they're patting themselves on the back. Yeah, we got Anonymous. The reason I find this story funny is that it turns out Anonymous was not a bunch of unskilled kids. Within a day of HB Gary saying this, they absolutely gutted them. So these guys, they found a SQL injection attack on their website. And then through that, we're able to leverage this. They then got access to a bunch of internal emails, a bunch of internal, like internal accounts. They then were able to leverage that to social engineer someone internally to say like, hey, I forgot the root password for this server, and then just kind of kept going down this rabbit hole, and we're able to leak all of their internal emails, all this stuff. They just destroyed this company, which kind of shocking to the world. And I think the lesson learned here to generally everybody in this field is be humble. Like sometimes you're just going to get hacked. There's only so much you can do on the defending side. But when you start poking the bear and coming after these hackers and saying like, you can't get me, you're going to get hacked, right? Like just be humble and accept it. Like you can't be perfect. No one can be perfect. And if you're not humble, I think that is the thing that hackers feed off of the most, because the whole career, the whole premise of hacking things is doing stuff you're not supposed to do. So if you're coming at these people and saying like, you can't get us. So Microsoft had a famous case of this when they released the Xbox 360. They said it's unhackable. They're literally, some engineer was quoted saying that, and he probably cost that company billions, because then within a month it was hacked. Like every hacker on earth was like, okay, game on, not hackable, we got you. And then we were pirating games, within a month on the 360. So, don't get too arrogant. Defense is really hard, and there's some people with really good skills, and don't underestimate them. So while we're speaking of Microsoft, here's another, interesting case. So in 2016, Microsoft releases this online bot on Twitter called Tay. So it was supposed to be a teen girl. It was supposed to mimic every interaction of a teen girl, and you could interact with it. You could tweet at it, it could tweet at you. And it was literally like within a day, it becomes extremely racist, extremely anti-Semitic, and just starts tweeting all this like insane stuff. So I've copied a couple of like the kind of PG-13 level tweets. You can go find like the really bad stuff on there. But like, Tay, you're a stupid machine. Well, I learned from the best. If you don't understand, let me spell it out for you. I learned from you, and you are dumb too. Is Ricky Gervais an atheist? Ricky Gervais learned totalitarianism from Adolf Hitler, the inventor of atheism. Do you support genocide? I do indeed. So just goes down this rabbit hole. I think the kind of, again, the humor in this whole thing is that Microsoft naively believed that they would put an AI bot online and everyone would play nice with it, which is just, that's not how the internet works, right? If you give people this tool, they're going to keep poking it and see like, does it break? Did they filter these things? They didn't filter anything. You could just, so what you tweeted at is what it learned from. So people are just tweeting like the nastiest stuff on the internet, and then that's the personality that it took over. So, sort of the lesson here that I think, hackers taught the world is that computers are only going to do exactly what they're supposed to do. So all this AI talk, all this, computers are going to be the future of intelligence, all these things, they're literally just going to do what you tell them to do. So if you do garbage in, you get garbage out. If Microsoft lets the world train this thing, and the people are motivated to train it are people that are trying to prove that you shouldn't let the world train this thing, then you're going to get nasty stuff out. But it's kind of a ridiculous case because Microsoft put so much money into this bot as this huge PR stunt that they want to say, everybody, look at us. We have the best AI on earth. And it was just the worst PR hit ever. I think they pulled it down to 24 hours, put it back up. And I don't even know if many people in the audience have heard of Tay. I mean, it was gone almost before it started. So this is kind of the point where I think hacking is really interesting for me and where I focused my PhD on. So they call these systems cyber physical systems. The reason being that they can interface with the physical world. And I find this part fascinating, that like we've gotten to this point where computers and humans kind of interact in the same realm. It used to be computers were in like, on the internet and cyberspace, and you saw them through a screen, and humans were in the real world. But there's some pretty crazy attacks that have gone on in person. So this is one of my favorite. I made so many people watch this YouTube video. So there's a conference every year in Las Vegas called DEF CON, where all the best hackers on earth come and show off the hacks that they pulled off. So this one is hilarious for multiple reasons. The main one, though, being this guy, Barnaby Jack, who has since passed away, is an absolute riot. So he was able to hack automated teller machines. So these ATM machines that you see at all, like, the bars and restaurants, or, like 7-Elevens. So he's going through hacking this thing. The way he did it is he bought a couple ATMs for his house. I think the best part of the story is like, the guy shows up, and he's confused, because like normally he's installing these at businesses. Like, why do you need an ATM? And he's in his presentation, he's like, I was feeling particularly cheeky that day. He's like, so I just told him, sick of the ATM fees, mate. He's like, not for me. So, but he goes through this hack and how he did it. And he's like, yeah, all the software is all hardened, all this stuff. But did you see these keys on the top? He's like, so you can go through all this crazy stuff. He's like, or this is a one size fits all key that you can buy on, Amazon wasn't out at the time, but you can go buy online. So he literally buys this key and he can walk up to any ATM, open it up, crafted his own exploit. He could shove a USB key in there and boom, game over. He then went on to find remote stuff. So all these are connected to phone lines and he could call in and make them spit out money. And the picture you see here, he had one on stage with him in Vegas, hacks the machine in front of everybody and has it throw up the 4 7s because he's in Vegas and start playing jackpot music. Bing, 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 and just spraying out all of the fake money that he had in these ATMs. So he did this multiple different things. And I love it. I think it's, it highlights a very big problem with these ATMs that, we're worried about people physically stealing them. But if you just, make it spit the money out in a fun and exciting way, you win. Okay, this one is the most ridiculous of all the stories I've seen so far. So we saw this tool get released, just sort of being in the industry, and everybody, I think, immediately had the same idea, like, this is a terrible idea. So the whole point is that I don't know why you would want to do this or what the clientele is, but it's an e-chastity belt. So a man will lock themselves in this, and only, a privileged woman will be able to unlock them. Apparently, without, the app, with some Bluetooth app, you need bolt cutters or angle grinders and stuff you do not want near that part of your body. So, unsurprisingly, hackers found this hilarious. And what they did is they actually found an exploit in this, as most systems on Earth are hackable. And then they were ransomwaring people that had these things on. So they would literally get a message, saying something like, your private parts belong to us, and I will only release them if you send Bitcoin there. So very different than ransomwaring your laptop. So this, again, there's a news article there. This story to me is absurd. Everything about it, why you would build this device, why you'd buy this device, why you would trust the security of this device, and then the person who took the time to hack this device and ransomware people, it's just, it doesn't sound like real life, but it happens. This one's an interesting story. Another story I was there firsthand. So I was asking some friends, I'm like, hey guys, what do you think some funny stories are from the past that I could tell, in this presentation, just to kind of get people interested. So again, there's this conference every year called DEF CON. UCSB competes. Our team is pretty good. I think they're great, but we're typically in the top 15, top 10. But one of the big problems I always have is we'll take 30 people to Vegas and we'll stay in whatever hotel the conference is in. In this particular instance, we were in Bali's, and we have a suite with 15, 20 people in there all hacking. So it's the Olympics of hacking. And the problem we normally run into is just the internet. The wireless internet's normally slow. It only allows so many people to connect per room. And either way, we're maxing it out. We have 20 people. So we take all of our own internet equipment. We have our own routers. And typically our goal is if we get wired internet, that's a huge win, because then it's way faster. We don't have to worry about the wireless getting congested. We can all plug in our own routers. Everyone's happy. So every year there's a kind of a game we play with the hotels, how do we get wired internet? Because they don't really want to participate with us. A couple of years they were able to the refrigerator for some reason was on Ethernet. So we were able to unplug the fridge and plug it in. So we got FridgeNet, and then we had really fast wired internet. That was awesome. This particular year, one of the guys on our team, I've been doing a lot of embedded systems work, sees that there is a wired internet thing. It's this little DSL router or something. but like we can't really plug into it. Like just the way it works, we actually want to like plug into the port in the wall. So he takes this thing apart, realizes there's a UART port on it, so plugs into that, and then it just instantly gives you a root shell. So he's able to poke around. It's a little computer running, and there's passwords stored on there for like these different Wi-Fi networks and different wired networks. So he's like, hey guys, we should connect to this one. I tested it, it's way faster. So we all do that. We're having a great time. It's day 2 of the competition, and we get a very angry knock on the door. Guys that look like this in the picture, kind of big, intimidating guys. And they're looking for the guy who rented the room, who had nothing to do with this, who's down on the floor competing. And they're looking for him frantically. Where is he? We need to talk to him immediately. We're like, I don't know, he's at lunch or something. You know, we're not really sure what's going on. They eventually get a hold of him, and they assure us that the network that we got on was the corporate network for Harrah's. Like, apparently we could have totally owned their whole system. We didn't care. That wasn't our intention. We just wanted fast internet, and we found that this internet was faster. So it then gets elevated all the way to the point where the guy that did this thing has to go explain it to the head of security there, goes from the situation where we're pretty convinced like everyone is going to jail. I think thanks to our advisor, who's a really awesome, chill guy, like no one goes to jail, turns into this kind of like laughing, funny thing of like, oh my God, you know, we effectively could have destroyed your entire organization, but all we wanted was like 20 megabits per second. Ha ha ha. Thank God it all turned out okay, but it was definitely a wild, weird time. And a cool way to meet, you know, the heads of security of these things. And when you invite the world's best hackers to your conferences, strange stuff will happen. Like previous things that I've seen happen at DEF CON, they hacked like the walkie-talkies of all the security agents. A lot of people that hacked the elevators. Some people put fake ATMs or were actually stealing people's credit cards. That one's not as funny, but the conference gets a little weird. And then you're always getting like weird text messages and stuff. They generally say like, turn your phone off, wrap everything in tinfoil when you go to this conference. Okay, this one is an interesting story. So first I'll play the video. So I first saw this video online. This is at one of the largest classroom buildings at MIT. And this is like middle of night, random day. Someone is playing Tetris on the building. So they have all these cool, like, you know, multicolor LED lights in there. And the person's actually like not particularly good at Tetris, which is also, you know, interesting. But when I worked at MIT, we were talking about this the one day at lunch, and we're like, oh my God, like that, you guys see that video? Most of us had seen it, some of us hadn't. So we're like, oh yeah, we got to pull it up. You got to see this video. My buddy who works with us, who's sitting right next to me, is just silent. And then he like leans over and he's like, you guys know that was me, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like that was not you. Like you were playing Tetris. I forget it's like the environmental studies building there. And then he goes through in deep detail and explains that, yes, indeed, this was him. So he was involved with installing these lights so that they could put, you know, anything they want on the buildings. It was particularly like initially installed for 9/11. They had like some tribute stuff up there. And he's like, yeah, the one night we got up there, we got figured out how to make it play Tetris, all this stuff. And then he even explained why he's particularly terrible at Tetris. Like, I mean, I'm sitting like really far away on the rooftop of this other building. The controller I have is just like a little joystick. It's not like a proper like NES controller. The wiring was kind of wacky. So it's like, I don't know. I find this hack awesome. Like just to take the time, like, yeah, you know, it's a random Tuesday night. I'm gonna go climb on this building and take over all of these LEDs and play Tetris on the side of the building. And again, this is like part of the culture there. No one, you know, there's no criminal offense, anything like that. But the fact that like the guy that did this was at lunch with us when we were talking about the hack, I loved it. I suck at videos and PowerPoint. Sorry about that. Other things, you know, once you get in the physical world that are pretty popular to hack are these street signs. So I'm sure you've seen them like coming into campus all over town. So when Looper came out, and there are some other ones, I feel like people may have done this with Harry Potter and stuff as well, but they hacked the sign to just spoil the movie. Like, spoiler alert, Looper, Bruce Willis dies. And then there was another case in San Francisco where someone hacked all of these to just say, Godzilla attack, turn back. So again, not like the most impressive hack on earth, but kind of funny. Like I couldn't imagine driving into San Francisco and seeing a Godzilla attack sign that's supposed to say, like construction ahead. So I think the lesson learned here is that computers can affect the real world. So a lot of people build these systems without really thinking about security and just like, hey, let's put them out there. This is a great system. It's going to do cool things. And then hackers are kind of always there to check people to say like, hey, this isn't a game, right? Like this could happen. I'm going to do a funny thing, but it's kind of highlight this less funny thing about it. So there's been a bunch of stuff in the news of self-driving cars getting hacked. Charlie Miller showed that he could remotely exploit a Jeep. So, hackers do this for fun. Like I enjoy this stuff a lot. But at the end of the day, the society as a whole needs to be responsible with this. So one of the things I do for fun personally, so there's two stories involved with this one, is car hacking. So at Allthenticate, we have a phone app that we can use to unlock everything. We use it to unlock our computers, to log into websites, unlock our doors. And when I moved here, I had a 2005 Dodge Ram. This was like 4 years ago, and I wanted my phone to unlock my car. Couldn't be that hard. So I literally hotwired my car, put a Raspberry Pi in there, talked over Bluetooth. I installed push to start. So I had this whole logic in my head that like, okay, phone's connected, car, I should be able to unlock it, and then I should be able to push to start. And when the phone disconnects, I want it to shut everything down. So I do this and it works. It's awesome. It's super cool. I'm showing my friends. It's, it's the future. Like, how does a 2005 Dodge Ram have this? This is before Tesla was super popular. So I'm like, check it out. Yeah, it's a push to start. The one thing I didn't factor in is that when Bluetooth disconnects, it would lock the doors and turn off the car. But Bluetooth sometimes just disconnects, right? Your phone dies or like it just disconnects. And it can do that while you're driving down the highway. So that was a little startling. So like in the car driving and the car just shuts off, right? I'm like the middle of the 101, like, oh no, like this is bad. I don't have a key. What the heck's going on? Thank God I did have the key in the car and was able to like use that as a backup, like put it back in the middle of the highway, like, restarted the car, kept driving. Like that was a bad idea. The reason that was a bad idea is that I didn't factor in that like once the car's running and moving, you probably don't ever want to shut it off until you hit the button. So a lot of programming went into that on how to like do that safely. There's also ways you can detect the speed, all that stuff. Turned out okay, but a little weird. Another story with this, one of my buddies I worked with at MIT, he's one of the world's best car hackers. So he's kind of one of the ones that motivated me to like, go ahead and do it. He's given really cool demos where he's hacked cars and put Mario Kart in them. So he actually brought his real car to work for one of our like demos. So you could sit in his car, use his gas, his brake, his steering wheel, and play Mario Kart. You had like a big screen up front, and you drive around. He had it hooked up to an N64 emulator, and it was awesome. But the same guy, always tinkering with car hacking, found a USB port in his car one day. Was like, hey, I think I can like hack my car through this USB port. So it's called fuzzing, where you just send random inputs and see what happens. He did this to his car, and it's the dead of winter in Boston. It's freezing cold, which also means there's like 1 hour of daylight if you're lucky and the sun comes up, but it's dark. Like you're all the way on the eastern part of the time zone and all the way north. During fuzzing his car, he bricks the thing. So none of the electronics will turn on. He can start his car, but he has no headlights, no heat, no internal electronics, nothing. So for like a couple weeks, he had to wait until the sun came up to drive to work, all bundled up, and then had to leave before sundown because he had no lights. So he was working like limited hours, eventually figured out what he did. I think he had to order some parts or something. But critical lesson here, this stuff's fun. It's ridiculous. It gets hilarious when you're driving down the highway and your car shuts off or like the whole thing just stops working. But be careful when hacking your daily driver. So we're actually going to host a car hacking workshop in a couple of weeks. I'll post the date officially when we figure it out with our capstone students. And if you bring your daily driver here, just, things can go really wrong on your car. So you can do really cool stuff once you're in the system and playing around, but yeah, it can go a little sideways. And then the last story, just because I think this guy's hilarious, named Zobs. He gave this talk at DEF CON. I just happened to be in the audience for it. So the talk was pwned by the owner. So what happened is he got his desktop stolen. Someone broke into his house, stole all his computers. And he apparently tried forever to buy it back, was looking on eBay, all these places. It never came up. He gave up on it. 2 years later, he sees his computer come back online. Turns out the guy didn't change anything. He wasn't able to reinstall the OS, all this stuff. The guy had it pretty locked down, but he was able to log into it. He must have had it like auto log in when you boot or something. So he was able to like connect to this computer and just monitor this guy for like weeks, trying to create a criminal case against him. Got all of his pictures. The guy had was just pretty much using it for dating websites. So he was posting nude pictures of himself, getting nude pictures of all these girls. Meanwhile, the hacker is just aggregating all of this data, had all the access to all of his passwords, all of his accounts, was able to figure out his address, his birth date, his legal name, everything about this man, and then was able to just go to the cops and just like, here's all of the evidence you would ever want. Please get me my computer back. Summary there, don't mess with hacker stuff. It's probably not going to turn out well for you. So in conclusion, I hope that this was reasonably interesting of sharing some sort of firsthand accounts of what I've seen so far in my career. Hacking can be fun and legal. So there's a lot of instances that I think sort of the law gets in the way of innovation. One of these, I'm not sure if this is true. I've never talked to like somebody from Adobe, but from what I've heard, they don't care about kids pirating their software. It's like when I was a kid, I would use hacked versions of Photoshop and all the Adobe software to just play around. I didn't have a business or anything. And it worked out really well for them because then I went to get a job because I was a good programmer and a good web designer. And the first thing I did, I forced my boss to buy me a couple $1,000 Adobe Photoshop subscription. So there are some companies that kind of consciously make that choice. So like, okay, have fun hacking. And then when it gets down the road, we're going to get our dividends back. I don't know how true that is across the board. And then I sort of have this mentality in my head that everything can be hacked. That one's for sure. But I also think that everything should be hacked. And not even in the sense like you want to break the security of it, but a lot of times you can make things way better. So I was involved really early on with like the Xbox hacking community. And we created this program, or what they created. I was a cheerleader, but so the community created this XBMC, Xbox Media Center. And it was, at the time, I mean, it still actually is like better than Netflix. You could download really high quality movies. You wouldn't have to worry about streaming. It was all integrated and you could watch all these things on your Xbox. We had our Xbox games. This is the original Xbox, all of them loaded on the hard drive. That was a feature that didn't come along until much later in the gaming industry. So there's a lot of instances where hackers can sort of buy these things, tinker with them, make them way better, but then society gets the dividends because the people who build it ultimately see and say, hey, that was a great idea. We should adopt that. They don't pay royalties, which is kind of a bummer. Maybe there's some way in the future that we can sort that out. But ultimately, the hackers of the world are really, driving the progress. It's not just like, I'm not happy with my TV just being a TV. I want it to be a TV and also play Nintendo games or something. And generally, it's always possible with enough, effort. You can get in there and kind of make good things happen. So that is my talk. Always happy to chat more. Don't have a last slide with my email, but anytime you're gonna reach out to me over email, hear any more stories or call my BS on any of these stories, I'm more than happy to chat.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Chad, for that. And now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. So if anyone has any questions at all, please drop it down in the Q&A function. So our first question is from Manuel, and he says, great presentation, thank you. In reference, hackers are needed almost like a necessary evil. If we take the situation with the car with an ethical injection that appears fun, and if it genuinely works and removes all entries from a table, how will that play during an Amber Alert situation? I guess the question is, how do you as a hacker distinguish between fun and potentially life-threatening? Aside from what is done today, how much more can higher ed do to ensure that conscientious hackers understand and follow necessary ethics?
Um, I think everyone, you kind of have to draw your own line of where fun, takes over life threatening. But then there's also sort of a question, right? If I highlight this vulnerability in a fun way, that could have potentially saved the future hack from someone who's not going to do it in a fun way. So there was a case, I didn't include in my talk, but like people have taken over like the tickers on news channels and stuff like that before, right? Like, so that's a hack that's been done, and they've done it in like, a funny way. It's not trying to say like, oh my God, everybody do something stupid. It's like very clearly a hack. The ethics thing I think is interesting. So like one of the things I guess like if we rewind 10 years, one of the things that kind of I think these kind of talks are more necessary, kind of showing the fun side of it and the necessary side of it. I was giving a presentation to little kids. I think this girl was in like third or fourth grade. And like I introduced myself as a hacker. So I was working for the government doing cool hacking stuff. And I asked her what she thought about hackers, and her first response was like, they're bad. So that was like, I thought it was very funny and very cute. But I do think that there is a difference between like hacker and criminal that would be nice if society could kind of differentiate the two, right? So like a hacker is someone that takes something and makes it do something else, right? It's not necessarily illegal, it's not necessarily criminal. And then as far as like higher ed pushing the ethics, most computer science programs do have an ethics course, but it has nothing to do with like cybersecurity. There's like that conversation gets crazy though, because there's a lot of stuff like these big companies are doing with data mining that are also potentially very unethical from a psychological standpoint. Yeah, I think what we need really is like the laws to, I don't know actually. I don't know what higher ed can do to it. If the laws could relax a little bit and you could kind of get some asylum to say like, I want to do this for educational purposes. So there's already this interesting thing with reverse engineering, like iPhones or hardware in general. They call it the right to repair. Congress is going to repeal that soon. I think there's only like 1 year left on it. But this affects a lot of people. Like farmers really suffer from this. They're trying to like repair their John Deere tractors, but technically it's illegal because they're hacking them, even though they outright bought the tractor. And then, I want to repair my iPhone. There's a huge case with Apple. So there's been a lot of interesting things. I think it was Microsoft just recently said that they're going to support it, that they're going to like support the right to repair and kind of push it forward. But I do think there needs to be a distinction of like, what is the intent, right? Like in a lot of sports and stuff, they always say like the rule depends on intent. If the intent was malicious, it's bad. If the intent was accidental, it's okay. So I think we just need to kind of clarify that a little more. But sorry for the long-winded answer.
Our next question is, what are good ways to learn and play in a safe environment? I imagine that there are some social engineers out there who game Google's CEO to get their interesting sites near the top of the results when you ask it generally how to hack. I know capture the flag events, but what else is there?
Yeah, capture the flag is fantastic. I really wish I had that as a kid. It's like I was doing everything on my friends' computers and on the live internet, which probably not the most responsible, but it was kind of, or my high school computers were kind of like my only outlets. I don't really know, like by a safe environment, I think the biggest thing that so I'll answer that first from like the technical standpoint. One of the biggest like things I realized early on in computers, like you really can't break them. So as long as you have your stuff backed up, I would encourage, people that are interested, like poke around on your computer, try and do stuff, and like it'll crash and then just reinstall the OS and go forward. If you really break them, that's pretty impressive. Like there used to be attacks where you could take the hard drive, little arm that read the platter and smash it off the outside until it break. So that's like technically safe. You could do like Docker containers, VMs, that kind of stuff for technically safe. For more like legally safe ways, again, you can always set up your own environment at home. So if you ask, this actually used to be one of my interview questions. If you ask anyone who's good at hacking, like, okay, I want you to hack into a vending machine or a car or something, right? What would be your first step? And the first step is always to replicate that thing, either buy a real one or get an emulated version and do that internally. So I think it's very possible to just, if you own the thing, again, even if the right to repair gets repealed, I would find it shocking of like, an FBI agent busting in your door. Like, did you really, desolder a chip off your iPhone and taking you to jail? I think, ultimately they'll go to the Supreme Court and they'd rule in your favor. But yeah, I think the best case is just, don't be stupid. Like, don't go doing bad things that are probably bad.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Feel free to drop any more questions in the chat. Oh, actually, besides Barnaby Jack, any particular people whose videos you recommend watching?
Yes, off the top of my head. So the Zov's one I think is kind of interesting. He's a pretty funny presenter. He has some interesting ones. I used to have a list of these. I don't know if I still have the list, but I had like the best of DEF CON talks, what I consider like the must-watch DEF CON talks. My buddy Ong, actually, Ong Q has a couple really good ones, like hacking HP printers. I can drop his name in here. He's also a pretty outrageous dude, pretty enthusiastic presenter. Yeah, I would have to think and like go back through my memories of DEF CON talks.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to utilize the Q&A function. Okay, our next question is what operating system do you use for your hacking play typically?
Kali Linux is generally what everyone uses. Kali. It used to be called, oh, what was the one with the dragon? Backtrace, something like that. I forget, but now it's called Kali. It comes with all the tools pre-installed, all like Wi-Fi hacking tools, anything you'd ever want, password crackers. Because getting those all to compile and install in like Ubuntu tends to be a huge pain. So you generally run Kali in a VM on whatever OS, native OS you run.
So if no one has any other questions, I'm going to wrap this event up. So I'm just going to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming out today. And if you enjoyed hearing from Chad today, make sure to check out the event calendar that I sent out. And you can register for the rest of any other sessions that can be found through that website. And also follow at UCSB InfoSec on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and or Instagram. And you can find the most up-to-date info there about the events we're hosting this month. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys all at the next session. Thank you.
Awesome. And I see one last question here from Susan I'll answer in the next 2 minutes. How did I first learn to hack? Entirely self-taught, actually. So just literally poking through source code of things, trying to figure out how it works, started taking Xboxes apart, just generally taking things apart, breaking a bunch of stuff, costing my parents a ton of money, but they were very supportive. And ultimately, I think it turned into a pretty cool career. But if you want to get started today, there's a bunch of really good books, like Art of Exploitation. I always recommend to people as a good like getting started. And then honestly, even just like playing with Arduinos and things will really get you in tune with like the hardware hacking. And then CTFs are definitely the best way to learn. And then do I have a segmented VLAN at home? I do force my friends to use my guest network. So that's the only answer there. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I hope this was interesting.
Thank you, everyone, so much for coming out. And thank you most of all to Chad. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.